Hey guys, this is Watchtower X, and for today's video, we're going to be talking about the futility of Satan's challenge. This idea that Satan challenged God by saying that all humans want to live their lives selfishly and that they would rather live the way they want to than to worship God. This all started in the Garden of Eden, a beautiful paradise filled with all the creatures in the world, a climate where humans don't need to wear clothes or worry about infections, and there are also magic trees there. When we read the account in Genesis chapter 2, God first tells the humans in verses 16 and 17, "From every tree of the garden you may eat to satisfaction, but as for the tree of the knowledge of good and bad, you must not eat from it, for in the day you eat from it, you will certainly die." Then the serpent approaches the woman Eve and poses her a question about whether or not she could eat from all the vegetation in the garden. She proceeds to tell him that the fruit of knowledge of good and bad, and about if she were to eat from it, she would certainly die. Now, the serpent responds in a very interesting way. He says in chapter 3, verses 4 and 5, "You will certainly not die, for God knows that in the very day you eat from it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God, knowing good and bad." For me, this is interesting because the very core doctrine of Jehovah's Witnesses is the fact that Satan is the serpent and the words he said here were lies. The reality is, both Adam and Eve didn't die within the day they ate from the fruit, but rather what happened was exactly how the serpent described. They became like God, knowing good and bad. So Eve eventually looks at the plant. She sees that it looks tasty and she ends up eating it. She also gives it to Adam. Adam also eats it. So they both ate from the tree. Then later, God is apparently roving about the Garden of Eden, perhaps in a figurative way, because apparently if you look at God, you will die. So he obviously wasn't physically there. But Adam and Eve are hiding from God. God shouts out to them and they say, "We're hiding from you because we're naked." God says, "What do you mean? Did you eat from the tree?" And they're just like, "Oh, yes, we did." And this all happens. So the next part, the next verses in this story is where it gets a little dicey for me. I just want to throw this out here. It doesn't really connect with the whole theme of the futility of Satan's challenge, but I just want to throw out the doctrine in the Watchtower that's very contradictory to what is evident in the Bible. What I mean by this is that they say that God kicked Adam and Eve out of the Garden of Eden because they disobeyed. That was what I was brought up to believe. That's what they teach in the Bible Teach book, all over Watchtower, Watchtower articles, and the whole Jehovah's Witness teaching is that the consequence for eating the tree of knowledge of good and bad is being kicked out of the Garden of Eden. But that's not true. Because when we read Genesis chapter 3, let's see, let me bring this up here. Let's read the whole bit just to get some context here. So let's start at Genesis 3 and 11. It says, "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree which I commanded you not to eat?" The man said, "The woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me fruit from the tree, so I ate." Jehovah God then said to the woman, "What is this you have done?" The woman replied, "The serpent deceived me, so I ate." And then Jehovah God said to the serpent, "Because you have done this, you are the cursed one out of all the domestic animals and out of all the wild animals of the field. On your belly you will go, and you will eat dust all the days of your life. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. He will crush your head, and you will strike him in the heel." To the woman he said, "I will greatly increase the pain of your pregnancy. In pain you will give birth to children, and your longing will be for your husband, and he will dominate you." And to Adam he said, "Because you listened to your wife's voice and ate from the tree concerning which I gave you this command, you must not eat from it. Cursed is the ground on your account. In pain you will eat its produce all the days of your life. It will grow thorns and thistles for you, and you must eat the vegetation of the field. In the sweat of your face you will eat bread until you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you will return." After this, Adam named his wife Eve because she was to become the mother of everyone living. And Jehovah God made long garments from skins for Adam and for his wife Eve to clothe them. So, when we read this whole bit, essentially God punished the three of them, the three people that had the whole relationship around the tree of knowledge of good and bad. So the three of them all got punished. God didn't say, "I'm going to kick you out of the Garden of Eden for eating this fruit." He did not punish Adam and Eve for eating the fruit. We can actually see why God kicked Adam and Eve out of the Garden of Eden in verse 22. In verse 22 it says, "Jehovah God then said, Here the man has become like one of us in knowing good and bad. Now in order that he may not put his hand out and take fruit from the tree of life and eat and live forever." With that, Jehovah God expelled him from the Garden of Eden to cultivate the ground from which he had been taken. So he drove the man out, and he posted at the east of the Garden of Eden the cherubs, and the flaming blade of a sword that was turning continuously to guard the way to the tree of life. So, there we see the reason why God kicked Adam and Eve out of the Garden of Eden. It wasn't because they disobeyed God. It was because God didn't want them to eat the tree of life and live forever. Of course, Watchtower isn't going to talk about that. I didn't even know that there was a tree of life until I actually read the Bible from beginning to end. There's a lot of things that they don't want to talk about, and this is one of them. This changes the whole concept of what they talk about. Their talking point is about how God punished Adam and Eve for making a bad decision. But alas, we must move on. And to move on to my next point, my question is how one could call this God a God of love. How could you call this a loving act? To say that, oh, because you disobeyed me, you're going to be kicked out of the Garden of Eden, you're not going to live forever, and all your children are going to kill each other, they're going to have diseases, they're going to have birth defects, they're not going to know the origins of their life because of the passing of time. And so they're going to start growing to hate each other because they're able to adapt to different environments and have different skin colors. And so they're going to hate each other because of the differences they have. So God is allowing all of these things to happen, and I don't see how you can call that loving in any way, to allow such calamities to be able to occur. Jehovah's Witnesses will tell you that this is all punishment for disobeying God's commands. But when you think about the ramifications, some of the things I've listed and many more things, you would start to wonder who God is actually punishing. Because the two human beings that made the mistake, they're only going to live for a short period of time. They were able to live, according to the Bible, many centuries. They were able to enjoy their old age. They were able to communicate with God. They were able to eat many things. They were able to see many different kinds of animals and enjoy just the peace of a world without conflict. Compare that to what we have now. We have mental disease, we have racial tensions, we have infections, we have mutations, we have starvation, we have genocide. There are many kinds of people born with defects that prevent them from even living for a few decades. So I ask again, who are the ones who are really being punished for the eating of this fruit? To top this all off, we have the Jehovah's Witness explanation as to why God allows such suffering. In Genesis chapter 3 verse 15, as we read before, it was apparently a prophecy about the coming Messiah. Through the Abrahamic line, Jesus would be born to liberate humans from death. It was about how Satan would be against Jesus, how he would cause them pain, but Jesus would ultimately come out victorious. I don't know about you, but I'm not getting any of that when I read Genesis 3:15. It's all supposed to be very prophetic, though. This whole interpretation of special events are derived from the abstract visions John had in the book of Revelations. You want to know what else this verse said? It also said that Satan challenged God's superiority by saying that humans would rather serve themselves than to serve God. Aren't we glad that the fundamentalists are able to read between the lines? Especially since the only time Satan challenged God on this point was in the book of Job. But let's just human them at this point. Let's just say Satan made this challenge to God. God is all-knowing and superior, so he would always know what's right and wrong. It's inevitable for Satan to be wrong, and yet he still stands by his point for whatever reason. God decides to give Satan a very long time to try and prove his point. But wait a minute. Who are God and Satan trying to prove the point to? Humans weren't and aren't briefed on the affairs of angels and God, so this challenge couldn't be towards them. Not to mention, the existence of Satan wasn't even mentioned until about 3 millennia after the events of the Garden of Eden even happened. This would mean that God wanted the point to be proven or driven to the angels in heaven. There is a book from the Jehovah's Witness organization called What Does the Bible Really Teach? And it has a grotesque illustration that I mentioned in another video. Let's read 2 paragraphs that show Watchtower's perspective on all this. It's in chapter 11, pages 12 and 13. Or I should say, paragraphs 12 and 13. Let us consider an illustration. Imagine that a teacher is telling his students how to solve a difficult problem. A clever but rebellious student claims that the teacher's way of solving the problem is wrong. Implying that the teacher is not capable, This rebel insists that he knows a much better way to solve the problem. Some students think that he is right, and they also become rebellious. What should the teacher do? If he throws the rebels out of the class, what will be the effect on the other students? Will they not believe that their fellow student and those who join him are right? All the other students in the class might lose respect for the teacher, thinking that he is afraid of being proved wrong. But suppose that the teacher allows the rebel to show the class how he would solve the problem. Jehovah has done something similar to what the teacher does. Remember that the rebels in Eden were not the only ones involved. Millions of angels were watching. How Jehovah handled the rebellion would greatly affect all those angels, and eventually all intelligent creation. So what has Jehovah done? He has allowed Satan to show how he would rule mankind. God has allowed humans to govern themselves under Satan's guidance. So yes, Jehovah's Witnesses do believe that angels who potentially may be dismayed from God's authorities need to be shown that he is correct and supreme. But seriously, what's up with this illustration? A teacher having their student undermined from a student who thinks they know better? There's just a few things wrong with this. First of all, no one's gonna die if the student's right or wrong. And second, the teacher doesn't have to kick the student out of class. That's the whole point of educating yourself. There's no one way of doing things. That's why we as humans are ever learning species. We're always trying to think of new ways of doing things. We're always trying to think of the easiest way to get from point A to point B. That's why we're always technologically advancing. If we're always trying to stick with one way of doing things, then that's how we're capping off our potential as humans. Not to mention, there's also incompetent teachers and bright students. So there could be a teacher that's just honestly doing things an old school style, and the student found something that's a lot easier to do. We just never know. So I just found this analogy very weird. But back to my point, the fact that God needs to prove to the angels that humans need God, and God is giving thousands of years to prove this by making humans go through all these kinds of pain, shows how God views humans. We're just pawns in their game. Think about it. This is just a game of numbers. God's trying to get as many people to worship him as possible, and Satan's trying to get as many people to not worship him as possible. So all these people are dying, and we're at a point where a certain religion is saying that unless they follow the doctrines that they preach, then billions of humans on the planet will die. Just think about what that means. God, throughout the history of mankind, has allowed many people to die, and he's chosen one nation out of all the nations on the earth to inherit his promise through one man. So one nation is given the opportunity to live forever, as it may be, or to repent for the wrongs that humanity has done. So only these people are given an opportunity through the history, through the canals of time. The rest within the history of Bible records were either killed for their utter hypocrisy, or for the fact that they're worshiping these unknown gods that don't exist because they don't know any better. And all these other people who just live around the world and never even had any kind of Jewish or Christian influence at all. These people lived and died. So what does that mean for them? They didn't get any opportunity to be influenced by this true God. But there's an answer to that in the Jehovah's Witness doctrine. The fact that after the events of Armageddon, there will be a time of resurrection, a 1,000-year period where humans would reach perfection. So all those who have passed and didn't have an opportunity to learn about God are going to be resurrected and given an opportunity to learn. But you have to consider the fact that these people have lived their lives through their own traditions. So they could come to their own conclusions about how they became resurrected through their own God or through some other kind of idea, or perhaps they didn't even know that they died. So these people are being resurrected once more, and they're given another opportunity to die again, because God won't just appear and allow them to know that he actually exists so that they don't have to die again. That's not going to happen, because that's cheating, right? There's one account I just want to mention as well. This account is in Matthew chapter 15, 22 to 28. And I'm mentioning this because I want to get back to my point about God not, God giving only a certain nation the opportunity of life, the opportunity of true worship. So this account is about Jesus not even acknowledging a woman. It says, "And look, a Phoenician woman from the region came and cried out, 'Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is cruelly demon-possessed.' But he did not say a word in answer to her. So his disciples came and began to urge him, 'Send her away, because she keeps crying out after us.' He answered, 'I was not sent to anyone except to the lost sheep of the house of Israel.' But the woman came and did obeisance to him, saying, 'Lord, help me.' In answer he said, 'It is not right to take the bread of the children and throw it to the little dogs.' She said, 'Yes, Lord, but really, the little dogs do eat of the crumbs falling from the table of their masters.' And then Jesus replied to her, 'O woman, great is your faith. Let it happen to you just as you wish.' So only because of her persistence, her daughter's demon was expelled. Priorities, my friend, and partiality. It's pretty evident that God is not about equal opportunity. He's not even about equal treatment. Really, what's the point in proving Satan wrong? If billions of humans and tens of thousands of angels are going to be killed, was it really worth it? And that concludes my little rant-ish video about the futility of Satan's challenge. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down if that's your cup of tea. I do plan on making an in-depth analysis about a certain Bible character, so be on the lookout for that. I hope to be having that out next week, and I will catch you guys next time.